Welcome to Let's Talk Dreams podcast, where your goals, dreams, and aspirations take center stage. I am your host, Dr. Carla Franklin, and I am so honored to be here with you on today. We have a very special guest with us today. Her name is Sonja Harrell. And one of the things that I just want to share with you is I met Sonja when we were on our way to the Woman Evolve conference. We actually were family together. And so that whole weekend, I called her cousin Paula because she resembles my cousin Paula. And so she was just family with us that whole weekend. And it is my pleasure just to have her, excuse me, have her on our podcast because she's going to share some very valuable information. She is an author. She participated in a book anthology, and we'll just unpack that a little bit more, but I want you to welcome with me Sonja Harrell to our podcast. Sonja.
Yes, thank you very much. I'm very excited to be here.
Wonderful. The first thing I want to do, Sonja, is I want to ask you just to share with us your personal experience as a caregiver.
Okay. My personal experience, I one of the things I would like to say is that um when you have children, and children are a blessing, and we just have to learn about the children, different things, and every child is different.
Yes.
So that's the one thing. So when you are navigating, your child is growing up, and are they meeting these milestones? Are they exceeding? And then, you reach out at first. This is human nature. You talk to your family, you talk to your friends, and you kind of get mixed messages.
Certainly.
But I feel I always had concerns. And even when I went to my son's pediatrician, I went to talk to family, and I never was comfortable
Okay.
with what they said. I always felt like, okay, no, something is not right. I couldn't say what it was, I couldn't explain it, but I just had my instinct told me there was a concern. And
Okay.
that's including going to the pediatrician, because we went to the pediatrician and they were like, oh no, he's fine. My oldest son, I have two children, two sons. My oldest son, their journeys were very different. I'll say that.
Okay.
My oldest son exceeded, like he met milestones early. He did a lot of things like early, but it still was just something that to me seemed concerning. And
Okay.
no one really got it. The pediatrician was like, oh no, he's fine. But I just wanted to make sense of it. I always just had a concern as a parent.
Okay.
Um, and So the biggest thing I would say is just you don't. I mean, he was my firstborn, so I didn't have anything to compare it with. That was another thing.
Certainly. Mm-hmm.
But we have an instinct a lot of times, and we need to learn to trust our concerns. And if you don't get the answer that you're looking for the first time, you may have to go ask someone else. But
Right.
it is something that, because if you don't feel comfortable, even if they're reassuring you, in the back of your mind you're thinking, oh, I'm not, something still doesn't sit well.
Mm-hmm.
So I became an advocate really from the beginning, just in search of making sense of everything, what was going on, why do these things seem off. I it just That's the best way to explain it. I couldn't. I mean, on paper everything looked great,
Right.
but there were just little subtle things that
Okay.
concerned me. Nothing, extreme, but I was just like, oh, I don't know. I couldn't in the beginning. I didn't know exactly what. I didn't know how to say. Well, oh yeah, it's this. But I was just like, oh, I don't know. So we go on to He starts school, and he was very bright, so that never was a question. But it was just little subtle things. Like one of the things, he always felt more comfortable. Like when he was in kindergarten, he would play with the kids like maybe a year behind. So when if he was in first grade, he was friends with the kids in kindergarten. So I was like, oh, what is it with his peers? So that was the one thing that stuck out with for me. And people were like, oh no, he just excused it away. But I was just like, oh no, just had
Right.
concerns.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I guess I really didn't get answers from my oldest son until I had my younger son.
Okay.
So it really went on, and they're 9 years apart. So it went on for a while without having those answers. My younger son had developmental delays, so he didn't do everything early. So that was the
Okay.
first thing that stood out to me. Like, okay, yeah, Kyle, that's my oldest son. He was doing this, and Josh isn't doing that. So that was like glaring for me. Like, okay, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
something is not where he is not performing. He wasn't doing those things at the same time. But the truth is, Kyle was exceptional. That's the first thing. No one ever said that to me, but now looking back, I
Okay.
realized that that was the case. Like by the time he was a year old, he spoke in complete sentences, and he was very formal. So like if he met you, he would want to know if you were Miss or Mrs. Now most 1 year old
Yeah.
speaks like that. So it's just certain things that I was like, okay. But they were like, oh no, he's on track. He was ahead. Um so yes, just learning the differences between the two. And then when I started to go to the doctor and just express concerns about my younger son, I always would ask about my older son, because by then he was like in middle school years, and he really struggled socially,
Okay.
connecting with his peers. It was just a lot of things. So I would just bring him into the conversation, even though we weren't there for him. Like, okay, look, he's
Right.
going through this. And I'm glad that I did that, because one of the doctors, my younger son's doctor, said, oh, I'm sorry he's going through this. And she kind of pulled some strings and was able to have him assessed, have an assessment. He was older, because I think the cutoff age by then was like, because by then my younger son was like 2. So he was, the cutoff age might have been 11, but she's like, oh, he's a sibling, and we know that your younger son definitely, is on the autism spectrum. So let's just see. And oh my goodness, when they did that assessment, it was called an ADOS. I'll never forget it. So a psychologist did it. We could watch through like the mirror room, and his just watching. And so they said that he was 98% classic Asperger syndrome. So
Okay.
that's like, now they changed the DSM since then. Now it's just autism, but that's just like on that spectrum scale. That's like the highest, like almost genius level of thinking. But like some things that we consider to be common sense, he
Yeah.
doesn't view the same way. So like some of his answers, I was like, oh my god, So I was happy in the sense that I could explain
Right.
what was happening, why he was struggling socially, and what we needed to do to help him.
Right.
I
Okay.
was I was guilty, because I felt like, oh my gosh, he wasn't diagnosed till he was 13.
Right.
So he had to struggle all of those years and develop, unfortunately, probably not the best coping mechanisms, but he had to help himself the best way he possibly could, because we didn't have this information
Right.
at that time. So I had to learn to forgive myself for that part, because I was advocating the whole time. Like I knew something, just didn't know what. And
Right.
I'm like, okay, this is where we are. But that part was hard, because it was just like, oh my gosh. Now, with my younger son, because he was younger, we had early event intervention for him. So his
Right.
experience was totally different, because now helping him tapping into all of these different tools, I can see how that's such a great thing. Because now, if you start when you're young, by the time you get to middle school, you have all of these coping skills. So it was a good thing and a bad thing at the same time.
Right. So thank you for sharing your personal experiences with us as a caregiver. And so what our audience can gather at this point is that we're talking about autism, and we're
Yes.
talking about just different behaviors that are on the spectrum, and really how to navigate through those experiences. And oftentimes, it may be the challenge of not being able to properly identify what it is that our children are experiencing.
Yeah.
So, as a parent, it's phenomenal that you were concerned about some of the signs that you were seeing, and being able to be the advocate, be their spokesperson, so
Yes.
that you can get the assistance that's necessary. And so we may have someone in our audience today that may be seeing signs and don't know how to label it, or don't know how to call it, or maybe somebody's been miscalled, some
Yes.
experiences and stuff. And so when we talk about Asperger's, oftentimes, the syndrome is basically, like you talked about, some social interactions may have some deficiencies,
Yes.
or there's like a repetition in behavior.
Yes.
And they're very, oftentimes, you said, intellectual, very highly
Yes.
intellectual. And so there's, their range of interest oftentimes is very narrow, so you
Right.
have to be very specific in detail a
Yes.
lot of times in being able to interact with someone who has Asperger's. And like you mentioned, they're higher on the spectrum than
Mhm.
someone who we might say just has autism.
Right.
And so, for the person who's dealing with those experiences, it was very important that you share when there are concerns as a parent, when you're watching your children either meet or have a deficiency in some of the milestones, that we know how to move forward, that we know how, to get the help and resources that are necessary. And so I believe that's what allowed you to really participate in the book anthology that we're going to
Yeah.
talk about today. So, in this book anthology, you shared your contribution. Your chapter was about navigating the autism spectrum disorder, and just learning how to be an advocate to that degree. So tell us about the chapter, and how you really gathered all your resources together to make this impact. The book is entitled Parents and Caregivers Guides, right, to navigate these complexities of what they call disabilities, medical challenges, mental health disorders, and trauma. So sometimes we don't know how to properly name these
Right.
things or name the experiences, but help us navigate through the autism spectrum, and what your contribution was.
The first thing is, I definitely, you want to tap into your all of the resources that you already have. Like usually, you're taking your child to the doctor, so they have their pediatrician. So you want to touch bases with the pediatrician, and don't be afraid to ask questions. Express your concerns. And like I said, a lot of times I didn't like the answer I got, so I would just keep asking questions.
Mm-hmm.
So so when I asked about, well, is there any other tests, like can they assess, is there anything else they can do to
Mm-hmm.
see, is there a challenge? So we got referrals, like he was referred to neurologists. But what I had to learn is that, like I said, don't be afraid if you don't immediately reach the your answer. You don't get the answer right away.
Right.
Because I definitely didn't. But I just not and if people ask, well, what did you? I just wanted to understand. I
Right.
wanted to be able to meet him where he was, understand what was happening, just make sense of it, because
Sure.
when he was younger it wasn't as difficult. By the time he got to middle school years, like 5th grade, well, that's the
Mhm.
socialization age. That's why it
Okay.
was so difficult for him. So
Right.
now it's time to connect with your peer. Well, he was saying inappropriate things, and so now we got suspensions and this, well, not suspensions, but detention. It was like
Right.
he was in, oh goodness, the teacher he had, and then he clashed with the teacher that he had in 5th grade. So he had detention every week. I was like, oh, this is crazy.
Yeah.
So, the first thing they recommended was, okay, well, you need to have him evaluated. So the school will recommend it if it becomes very problematic. So that's another resource. It's scary, and I know most parents get nervous because you
Mhm.
figure, oh my goodness, what are they going to say? But you can ask questions. You can help,
Right.
like, use it as a tool to help you.
Right.
So, and then also, you're the best advocate for your child. You know your child better than anyone else. So you can also share what you experience, because their his behavior may be one way at home, and
Mm-hmm.
it may be different at school. So
Right.
that's another thing. So just tapping into all of those things, and just also at the end of the day, yes, you want to know what's going on, but you want to know, what can I do to help him? Because a lot of
Right.
times, the school is like, oh yeah, this is a problem, but they're not really saying, like, oh, we could work together to do this, and this would be helpful to your child. So your child really needs you to
To really
speak
be.
up for them, be their voice, and express the concerns. Because while he was having difficulty, he was being up, he was upset by a lot of these experiences too. So just you being a balance of, like, okay, I'm trying to figure out what's going on. And I was fortunate enough, because my younger son was even, by this time he had been um, diagnosed, and he was receiving services through ChildLink. So they were coming into our home providing
Okay.
services. So he had an occupational therapist, a physical therapist, a speech therapist. So again, what I learned to do was, although it wasn't my oldest, I always would, whatever I could learn from
Bring
each
it
person
in
I
there.
came in contact with, I would ask about the other child's situation, no matter whose
Right.
appointment it was. And it was really an occupational therapist who came in. And one of the days, my younger son was tired, so I think he was taking a nap. So we talked about what was going on with my older son. And
Right.
she was very supportive, because she said, I'm not liking this, because the school keeps saying what you need to do, but nobody is trying to say, like, this will be beneficial for your child. So she was funny, because she was very clear. She participated at another center, and she did I'm sorry, group therapy, and it was actually to teach socialization.
Okay.
So she was very familiar with autism spectrum, with Asper, all of that. Of course, I wasn't. And so
Yeah.
this is what she said. She said, I'm not a doctor, so I can't diagnose them. She told me, go on WebMD and look up Asperger syndrome and look at the characteristics of it, and see if you think he meets those characteristics. I shared it with my husband, and again, like I said, it would be so many things going on. We just wanted to understand what
Right.
was happening. So I thought, I read everything. Being friends with younger friends with someone younger, that was one of the things. Not being able to read social cues, that was another thing. Like,
Yeah.
I remember my husband saying to him one time, "You can't see that your mother was upset." Well, he couldn't. He couldn't read it.
Right. He's
So
just.
all of the, like, as we went down the list, I was like, "Oh my gosh, this, like, explains everything." So I was excited, because I'm like, this is what it is. So I
Right.
love that, she said, she was telling me, try a neurologist. They may not diagnose, and the first one that we went to did not, because he had a conversation, and it's kind of interesting, I'll say, because a lot of times people, even doctors, think that if someone is on the autism spectrum, or they have autism, that
Yeah.
means they're not intelligent.
Right.
That's definitely not the truth. So when we went to the neurologist, he's like, "Oh my, he's so articulate. Like he was so fixated on his vocabulary and all of this stuff." And he's like, "So it can't be that." And I'm like, "But it is." So I was disappointed, but she had already prepared me. Like you
Right.
might not get the right answer the first time, but you just have to keep trying. You have to keep trying till you get to the right doctor who will really be able to see that this is
Right.
what it is. So I was so grateful she had prepared me for that. And like I said, it took until we got to one of my younger sons. She was a developmental pediatrician. And so
Okay.
every time we came in, it was some new, because that's how every day was something new. So whenever we saw her, we would tell her like whatever was going on. So that's what made her pursue. And that's when we finally got, okay, yes, clearly this is what he has. And I know a lot of times a lot of parents are afraid because they don't want their children to be labeled. For me, the way I viewed it was without this label, he can't get the services that he
Right.
needs. So nothing, no one will explain his behavior. No one will accommodate anything. You're just kind of stuck. So
Right.
I viewed it a different way. Like, okay, if I can get this and now I can help him, then this is going to be progress. So that's kind
Absolutely.
of how, but definitely understanding that probably the first person, if you do have that experience, that's great. But that was
Right.
not my experience. It took a while for us to get to someone who really, assessed and saw and was prepared to,
To
put him
give
in a
you the
better
assistance.
situation where he could be successful.
Right. So, audience, I hope that you are listening and you get an opportunity to hear that if you have some concerns about your children being on the autism spectrum, you may not get the answers and the resolution that you need immediately, but it is very critical and very vital to their development that you keep reaching out until you feel comfortable with the resources and information that's necessary. Oftentimes, I do know that they will have the child on an IEP in school, and they might have an aide that will help and work
Yes.
with them in the school setting. On other instances, there have been times that the kids, their social aptitude is not that they feel comfortable in the regular school setting. So they might have like a little bit of different programs of learning so that they may not be in the same social settings. But as a parent and as a caregiver, it certainly is important that you know your child. Period. Whether they're
Yes.
on the spectrum or not,
Mm,
it is
right.
so important that we know our children so that you can be the voice when they're not able to speak up for themselves. And so, getting the information and getting the resources help to build them so that they might have opportunities for work employment.
Yes.
As they get older,
Yes.
um, being able, whether you'll learn whether they'll ever be able to live on their own or whether they'll always need an aide or an
Mhm.
assistant. These are some of the opportunities we get to learn early when we're talking about navigating through these experiences, and it's always for the betterment of the children. And so I know in one of the conversations that you and I had, because you are such an advocate and such a learner, and you want to be able to know what it is that you're living with and the experiences so that you can be the help
Right.
that's needed for your sons. Tell us about the opportunities that opened up as a result of you taking the initiative to learn so much about the autism disorder spectrum.
Okay. Well, one of the things it's interesting because I never like you. I've everything you said is true, but I never, as you're doing it, you don't think of it like that.
Absolutely.
I
Mhm.
just felt like I wanted to understand them. I wanted to understand, why do they, how they think, how they process information, and I didn't want them to feel like they were alone. That was like the
Sure.
biggest thing for me. So I started reading and researching, and it was very interesting to me. So I read everything I could, and it helped me because I felt like I gained a better understanding
Yeah.
of each child. Like, I would listen to what the doctor said, but the funny part is they would tell me like how they were so different in the beginning. The truth is they're really not. They have a lot in common. Um, and it's just that my oldest son can articulate it better.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so just understanding that information, understanding the why, what's the why behind it, and but it
Yes.
made me realize we had like a lot of support, behavioral specialists and things like that we work with, and they would say to me, have you ever considered working in this field, because you've learned a lot, you're really knowledgeable. And I told myself, I'm just a typical parent. So
Yes.
I believed that at first. And they would say, no, you're not. Like,
Mm-hmm.
you really know more than you realize you know.
Yes.
And this is something that you're really good at figuring out. Because, like I said, just understanding that the diagnosis, it might be, and I mean, you grieve. It's not like it's an easy thing. I'm not going to say like you get this diagnosis and you're just excited but I looked at it as a means to an end, because now I could get services, I could get support. So it's something that you need to help them.
Mm-hmm.
So once we did that, I realized, I was like, okay, you know what? I think that I am interested in this field, but I was comfortable at the time. I was working full time in health insurance, but my whole department was outsourced.
Okay.
So I got laid off, but that opened up the opportunity for me to go back to school,
Mm-hmm.
and I studied marriage and family therapy, because a lot of times when I would take my children to therapy, I would feel like it was something missing. Like, I was like, well, they don't want to talk to us, they just want to talk to him. Now, I didn't even know
Okay.
about the marriage and family therapy field at all. I just
Yes.
felt like if you talk to all of us, because we all live together, that
Yes.
would be a better thing. Now, little did I know it was a whole curriculum saying
Uh-huh.
everything that I thought. So when I got laid off, it definitely was a great opportunity for me to study it. I realized I that was everything I thought was true, how it benefits, because we all play different roles in our family because we live in a household. So the
Right.
best way for us all to be healthy is for us all to have therapy together, and we can
Yes.
talk about what, because if you spend enough time with anybody, you're going to get on each other's nerves. So I
Right.
might do something to trigger you. If we live together, you might do something to trigger me. Like, so
Mm-hmm.
if we figure out how we can be successful and cohabitate, that's the best therapy.
Right.
And so that's what I learned. So I went back to school. I was able to go back to school, and I got my master's in marriage and family therapy. So now I'm actually working in this field. So
Okay.
it's definitely rewarding, because a lot of times some of the experiences that I had raising my children, I get to use now with different families that I work with.
Yes, that's amazing because sometimes, like you said, we don't always know what the purpose of our journey is,
Yes.
but it's often opportunities to be able to reach back and help someone else through the experiences and stuff that we've had. And although it may not have been what you initially thought that you were going to pursue
Right.
as a career, it certainly was an aspiration to be able to make sure that you equipped others with the tools and the resources that might be able to help their family and
Yes.
their marriages. Because the truth be told, we don't have to have spectrum disorders to need family
That's
therapy
true.
and to need resources to help
Mhm.
us, like you said, cohabitate together and be successful. So that is just a great experience of life, just to let us know that the sky becomes the limit to what it is that you're able to do and
Yes.
become if you're willing to take the experiences, the good, the bad, the indifferent. I'm sure, like you said, there were moments that you just wish that you had more tools and you wish
Yeah.
that you had more resources. And that became the driving force
Mhm.
for you to go back to school. So life created an opportunity,
Yes.
and you certainly took advantage of it to be able to now help other families be successful in identifying some of the things on the spectrum so that they can live healthy and whole lives. Everybody, I'm sure, in our audience has encountered, know someone who maybe their
Mhm.
loved ones, their family are on the spectrum, and certainly these resources and tools are very beneficial. I remember one of my friends. She has a son on the spectrum, and one thing is like you want to make sure that things are done in a timely way, in a timely fashion,
Mhm. Yes.
and there's order is necessary.
Mhm.
And so that keeps them on track, it keeps
Yes.
them in alignment. And I know even an experience of older adults with autism
Mhm.
working, they are good with detailed work,
Yes.
and so it's in the details that they find their places.
Yes.
And so it's things and stuff that you learn, and it's all about being a better resource and an advocate, if you will. And so for someone in our audience that's listening, resources are available, and don't feel like you are alone. There's community
Yes.
here to be able to help you, and don't feel like something is wrong
Right.
when in actuality you have been blessed, we'll say, that you have been chosen to care and nurture an individual that has different needs, because
That's
that's
right.
what it becomes,
Yes.
different needs
That's it.
that you're able to equip someone with. So it's the awareness, it's the support,
Yes.
it's all of those things encompassed together. And so is there any resources that that you could share with someone, even in the book anthology, um, that really becomes a help to someone that's listening?
That's true.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And the biggest thing that one thing I want to piggyback on that you mentioned that I feel like that's an underlying feeling when you experience these things or any difference, because I
Mm-hmm.
think of it like you said, it's a learning difference and it could be anything. It doesn't just
Mm-hmm.
have to be autism spectrum disorder. What it does is it makes you feel isolated. So you
Mm-hmm.
believe that you're the only person experiencing this, no one else understands. And it if you focus on that, it kind of takes up all of your energy away from you, and you have to understand. I because I am a believer.
Yes.
I My faith is what helped me. That's the biggest
Yes.
thing because I don't believe that God makes mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm like you were talking about the tools. I had to realize that I had to learn to tap into, yes, outside resources, but inner resources. Because I don't believe it was a mistake that God chose us to be me and my husband to be their parents. So we
Yes.
do have those tools. We just have to tap into what they are.
Yes.
And so that was the biggest thing, and understanding that no, you're not alone. You are
Mm-hmm.
not isolated. That's a trick of the enemy to make you feel like, oh, you can't do this. You're by yourself. You don't have any help. You do. And sometimes just having a conversation or listening to someone. You know, if you're
Yes.
at a low point, sometimes you just want somebody to say, you know, I understand and just hear you out. So
Yes.
those are the things, like isolating yourself is not the best way because sometimes it's really overwhelming and you
Yes.
need community, like you just said. So that's the one thing that I always want to share. And then because my children are older, so for people just starting out, I want them to say, like, look at me, I did it. So you can do it.
You
You
can.
can get through it. Is it difficult? Yes. Sometimes it doesn't seem like it's just overwhelming. Yes, but you can do it. And
Yes.
for and I realized that's what I'm supposed to share. I'm supposed to share, you know, these things so people can realize, okay, no, it's not just me. Oh yeah, that happened to me. You feel so much better when you realize you're not alone.
Yes. Absolutely. And it's the sharing that really gives you the strength and the ability to link up with our faith to be able to know that this is just a moment and we're going
Yes.
to get through this moment.
Yes. Yes.
I laughed in a little bit to myself because, like I said, I do have a friend who has a child
Hmm.
on the spectrum, and they're very functional. And so it's not that there's anything that they can't communicate. You just
Right.
have to learn their social timing,
Yes.
right? Of
Yes.
interest in
That's it.
socializing. And then one of the things that they struggled with at one point was that at some point through their teenage years, they got a hold of cursing, right? And so
Hmm.
that was like their to do. They wanted to use profanity, and it was something that was like, this is not language and this is not vocabulary that we express at home.
Right.
So it was was a challenge for them, and then they were like, sometimes they felt like embarrassed
Hmm.
when the episodes would come up, and you can't control
No,
episodes,
you
and you
can't.
learn how to just make the adjustment
Right.
and be confident in your ability to process through these moments. And those are opportunities that are important to share
Yes.
in the community, so that people don't think they losing their mind or they'll go off on a tangent and
Right.
be upset
Hmm.
because these experiences come. So that awareness becomes very vital in
Yeah.
sharing in probably those family therapy sessions
Yeah.
that helps us all know how to respond or don't
Respond.
respond.
Hmm. That's so true.
Yes,
It's
yes.
true. Because you know what? I think it's what I say, what I learned. Okay, now once they were diagnosed, depending on who you talk to, they
Hmm.
may blame everything. Oh, it's I'm like, okay, everything is not this.
Right.
What happens, in my opinion, is that so many things that typically developing people experience, they experience too. They just process it different. So it's going to be a whole, I say it's kind of like it's on steroids. To
Okay.
somebody else, it wouldn't be a big deal. But
Yeah.
to them, it's like, oh my, uh, so it is, but just understanding, like you said, why is this happening? Because that's the biggest thing. If I understand why is this attention seeking behavior,
Hmm.
you learn this from somebody because like you just described. So why are you doing this? Maybe it's like, oh wow, this is how I get attention. You just, if
Yeah.
you understand the why of it, then you'll know, do I ignore this? Should I be concerned? Like what
Yeah.
do I do? And no matter what you face, that's the way you have to break it down and figure out how you manage it. But
Yeah.
it's just, but anybody, like, and this is the funny thing, like I never taught my sons, like, oh, you have a disability, because my philosophy is everybody is managing something. They
Yes.
may not be this, so I never, so that was my way of normalizing it. I never made them
Yes.
feel like, oh, you're different. Nope. We all have to manage something. So
Right.
this is what you have to do. You have to understand, if you do this, if you say this, like my oldest son, when he would say, oh, I'm like, you can't just say whatever you think.
Yes.
because people are fearful. So
Yeah.
I said, especially after 9/11, you know what I mean. You gotta be careful.
Yes.
But I advocated and fought and got them into schools that were better settings for them, where they could be more productive.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was helpful. And that was something that, and I say that was God, because in my mind, I thought, okay, if he's in this setting, he's going to be more productive. Same for my younger son. If he's going to be, so it happened just what I thought. I was able to advocate for them and help it come to fruition, to see that yes, he did thrive in the classroom where it was a smaller classroom set. They both did.
Yeah.
And they were productive and just things like that. So just like you said, when you know your child, you know what they need, you know what's going to help them, and you just advocate for them until you get what you need. And that's the biggest reward, because it's like I remember thinking like, oh, and I didn't have proof. I couldn't prove that,
Yeah.
but I just believed it, and I'm just so grateful that I was able to see it come to be.
Wonderful. Sonia, it's really been a pleasure just talking with you and just sharing your journey with the autism spectrum and navigating and resources and being an advocate and then reaching back, going back to school and helping someone else with marriage and family therapy as someone else's journey comes this same way. And I
Yes.
love that you said that everyone is managing something,
Yes.
and it just puts us at an even playing field
Yes.
just to know that let's be loving, let's be caring, let's be respectful
Right.
of humankind.
Yes.
Everybody
Yes.
just needs to be respected. And so please share with us as we wrap up, your book and how someone can get a copy of the anthology. And we want to say that that's what it is. It's a book anthology, just about navigating the complexities of just various disabilities, medical challenges, mental health disorders, and trauma. So, to our audience who may have the ability to experience one of these areas, this is a tool and a resource that would be very beneficial to you. So please share that with us, Sonia.
Okay. The best way to uh, reach me, I would say, would be through my email address,
Mm-hmm.
and that is S is in Sam, K is in Kate, M is in Mary, my last name, HARRELL at yahoo.com. So that
Awesome.
would be the best way. And if you were interested in, if you had questions, I mean, I'm open to questions. If you were interested in receiving the book, I am definitely active on social media.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn. Um, But and also I want to say we're going to, and I know you participated and we had the virtual launch, but we're going to have another a face to face, because I definitely like the opportunity to meet people face to face and talk to them whenever possible. A lot of times maybe somebody might not be comfortable if it's an online conversation, but if they're standing right in front of you, they may ask a
Yes.
question.
Mm-hmm.
So that's next month. So February 22nd, it's a Saturday. We're having a book conference. It's going to be from 11 a.m. to 5 p.m.
Okay.
And it's going to be at the Springfield Township Library. It's on Paper Mill Road in Montgomery County in Philadelphia. Well, outside of Philadelphia.
Okay. Well,
So
yes.
that's something, and we'll have like we'll talk. We'll discuss. I'm going to be a keynote speaker there, so I'll have a topic that I'm discussing there, and we'll talk more about the book and my chapter there also. And I'll be there like for meet and greet. So if anybody had questions or whatever, or had something they wanted to discuss, I would be available for that.
Sonia, that is awesome and amazing. Please share your flyer with me so
I
that I
will.
can share that
I definitely will.
with others. And once again, Sonia has shared her social media platforms and this opportunity that's coming up. If you want to talk with someone as it relates to some of these complexities and how to advocate and how to find the resources necessary for you, please make sure that you connect with Sonia, and we'll make sure that we share this event with you. It has certainly been our pleasure, and we thank you for joining us on the Let's Talk Dreams podcast. We have had so much information that you might need to just even come back and watch again. So we ask that if you've enjoyed this episode, please share it with someone that you know would be impacted and encouraged by the information that was shared on today. And so thank you for tuning in to Let's Talk Dreams podcast, where again, your goals, your dreams, and your aspirations take center stage. And until next time, keep dreaming and keep taking actionable steps towards your goal, because it's always about doing, responding effectively with your abilities to maximize your success. We'll see you again in our next episode. Thank you.
Thank you.